"He is not your son," nurse says 30 years later. DNA test reveals the unimaginable. Robert felt the floor disappear beneath his feet when the grey-haired woman entered the hospital waiting room. She was trembling. Her wrinkled hands held a yellowed envelope, stained by time. Her voice came out weak, almost a whisper broken by guilt. "Mr. Miller, I need to speak with you about that night in 1993. About your son." His heart raced. 30 years. 30 years of a buried truth that was about to explode like a bomb at the center of the life he had built. What this retired nurse had to say would change everything. Absolutely everything. If you like real stories that stir your emotions, subscribe to the channel to always receive special content like this. Now come with me to discover this story that will leave you speechless. Robert Miller was 58 years old and carried on his shoulders the weight of a lifetime dedicated to his family. Every morning, he woke up at 5:30, prepared black coffee without sugar, and looked out the window of the small house in the modest neighborhood. The paint on the walls was peeling, the rusty gate creaked when it opened, but that house was his refuge. There he had raised Peter, his only son, with all the love a father could give. Robert's face had deep marks, grooves that time and hard work had carved into his brown skin. His hair was already completely white, but his brown eyes still shone when he spoke of his son. He was a mechanic by trade, owner of a small auto shop that barely paid the bills. His hands were always dirty with grease, his nails eternally black, his knees aching from bending down so often to fix old cars. But he never complained. Never. Peter was 30 now. Tall, thin, fair-skinned, with green eyes that shone differently from Robert's. He had always been different. While Robert was quiet and reserved, Peter was expansive, talkative, a dreamer. He worked as an English teacher at a private school downtown, something Robert never imagined possible when he looked at the small boy playing in the dirt backyard. Robert's wife, Marion, had passed away 12 years ago. Breast cancer. He could still smell the cheap perfume she used, still hear her laughter echoing through the empty rooms. Marion was everything to him. Petite, frail, with those dark eyes full of secrets he had never fully deciphered. She spoke little about the past, about her family, about that night in the hospital when Peter was born. Every morning, Robert opened the auto shop at 6 o'clock. The smell of diesel oil mixed with reheated coffee filled the air. Joe, his only employee, a man in his 40s with a protruding belly and an easy smile, was already there, organizing the tools. "Morning, Mr. Miller. Another day, another battle, huh?" Robert just nodded, picked up his grease-stained blue coveralls, and started working. His hands moved on autopilot, taking apart pieces, checking engines, but his mind was elsewhere. Ever since Peter started talking about taking a DNA test to discover genetic predispositions to diseases, something had been bothering Robert. A chill down his spine, a bad feeling he couldn't name. Peter showed up at the shop every Saturday to have lunch with his father. He brought ready-made meals because he knew Robert forgot to eat when he was working. They sat on the old wooden benches next to the shop, under the shade of a mango tree that had been there before Robert bought the lot. "Dad, I scheduled the genetic test for next week. Don't you want to do it too? It's free through the school's insurance." Robert chewed slowly, the knot in his throat tightening. "What for, son? I'm fine, thank God." "Ah, Dad, it's important. Prevention is better than cure. Besides, it's interesting to know your own genetics, your origins, that kind of thing." Origins. The word echoed in Robert's mind like a funeral bell. That night in 1993, when Marion went into labor, it was all so confusing. They were young, scared, without money. The public hospital was packed, women screaming, babies crying, nurses running back and forth. Robert stayed in the waiting room for 8 hours, pacing back and forth, biting his nails until they bled. When a nurse finally appeared with a baby in her arms, wrapped in a faded blue blanket, she said only, "It's a boy. Mother and baby are doing well." Robert took that small being in his arms and felt the world stop. The little closed eyes, the pink skin, the tiny fingers. His son, his Peter. But Marion was strange after the birth, too quiet. She looked at the baby with an expression Robert couldn't decipher. Fear? Guilt? She cried a lot, hugged Peter with desperation, whispered things he didn't understand. Forgive me," she repeated. "Love, forgive what? You were a warrior. You brought our son into the world." She just shook her head, tears streaming down her pale face. "You don't understand, Robert. You'll never understand." He attributed it all to postpartum, hormones, exhaustion. With time, Marion returned to normal, or at least pretended to. But Robert noticed she carried a weight, a secret that consumed her from the inside like an invisible cancer. Perhaps that was what years later manifested in her body, the weight of secrets. The years passed. Peter grew up strong and healthy. He was a curious boy, loved books, spent hours drawing. He didn't take after Robert in almost anything. People commented, they always commented, "Wow, your son doesn't look anything like you, huh, Robert? This boy must take after his grandparents, right? Look at that. Blonde with green eyes. So cute." Robert smiled, pretended it didn't bother him, but it did. The sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the peeling paint, wondering, questioning, but he never had the courage to ask. Never. Marion fell ill when Peter was 18. The cancer was fast, aggressive, merciless. In her last days, delirious from morphine, she called for Robert, held his hand with surprising strength for someone so fragile. "Robert, I need to tell you about Peter." His heart froze. "No, love, rest. You need to rest. No, you need to know. You need—" But her breathing failed. The monitors beeped. The nurses invaded the room, and Marion departed, taking the secret with her. Robert never brought up the subject again. Buried the doubt along with his wife, focused on being the best father possible for Peter. He paid for the boy's English degree with the sweat of his brow, working 16 hours a day, on Saturdays, Sundays, holidays. It didn't matter. Peter was all he had. Now, 15 years after Marion's death, that nurse appeared. "Helen Foster," said the old badge hanging from her bag. Robert ran into her by chance in the hallway of the hospital, where he was having a routine checkup for his high blood pressure. She recognized him immediately. "Mr. Miller." "Robert Miller." He stopped, turned. The woman was about 70, completely white hair pulled into a low bun, thick prescription glasses, hands trembling slightly. Parkinson's, perhaps. "Yes, that's me." "And you are?" "I was a nurse at City Hospital in 1993. I was there when your son was born." Robert's blood froze in his veins. The hallway seemed to narrow, the fluorescent lights flickered. "What did you say?" "I need to talk to you, in private. Please, it's about that night. It's important. Very important." They sat in an empty waiting room. Helen took the yellowed envelope from her bag. Her hands trembled so much the paper almost fell. Robert felt cold sweat running down his back. "Mr. Miller, I've carried this with me for 30 years. 30 years, I couldn't anymore. When I got the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months to live at most, I decided I need to settle my accounts with God and with the people I hurt." "What are you talking about?" Robert's voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. Helen took a deep breath, tears already streaming down her wrinkled face. That night, on March 15, 1993, 2 women gave birth almost at the same time. Your wife, Marion, and another woman, Beatrice Santana. Both babies were born minutes apart. 2 boys. Robert's heart was beating so hard he could hear the blood pulsing in his ears. And there was a switch. The babies were switched. The world stopped. Simply stopped spinning. Robert felt the room spin, nausea rising in his throat. "What are you saying?" "I was having an affair with Beatrice's husband, Paul Santana. He was a resident doctor at the hospital. We planned everything. Beatrice's baby was born with serious complications. Heart problems. They were rich, had the means to pay for the best treatments. Marion's baby was born perfect, healthy. So we switched them." Robert couldn't breathe. The words made no sense. They couldn't make sense. "You're saying Peter is not my son. I'm saying the baby you took home was not Marion's son. It was Beatrice's. And Marion's son, your biological son, was raised by the Santanas." But before we continue and discover the outcome of this emotional story, leave your like here in the video, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and activate the bell so you don't miss any new stories. Do you believe there should be harsher punishment for cases of baby switching in hospitals? Also tell me which city you are watching this video from. I'll mark your comment with a special heart. Now let's get back to our story. Robert spent 3 days locked in his house. He didn't open the auto shop. He didn't answer the phone. Peter knocked on the door, worried, but he yelled that he was sick, that he needed to be alone. Every minute, Helen's words echoed in his mind like a scratched record. "He is not your son. He is not your son. He is not your son. He looked at the photos on the wall. Baby Peter in Marian's arms. Peter as a child learning to walk. Teenage Peter graduating from high school. Adult Peter receiving his college diploma. 30 years of memories. 30 years of love. And it was all a lie. No, it couldn't be true. Helen was a crazy old woman, delirious in her last months of life. It had to be that. But what if it wasn't? What if it was true? Robert picked up the envelope Helen had left with him. Inside, old documents, hospital records, a handwritten confession detailing everything. How she and Paul Santana switched the baby's identification bracelets, how they gave the healthy baby to Beatrice and the sick baby to Marian, how Paul paid Helen to keep silent. $10,000, a fortune at the time. There was also an address, the Santana family, or rather what was left of it. Paul had died of a heart attack 5 years ago. Beatrice lived alone in an apartment in an affluent city neighborhood, and their son, the son who should have been Robert's, was named Luke Santana. He was also 30 years old. Robert's mind collapsed. He needed to know, he needed the truth. But what if the truth destroyed everything? What if Peter found out? How could he look his son in the eye and say, "You are not my biological son. I raised someone else's child for 30 years. And the other boy, Luke, was he Marian's true son? The son who should have grown up in that humble house, eating beans and rice, studying in public school? Instead, he grew up rich, spoiled, with all the privileges money could buy. Robert started to investigate. Discreetly, without telling anyone, he discovered that Luke Santana was a businessman, owner of a successful tech startup. He had an apartment in a trendy neighborhood. An imported car traveled the world. The photos on social media showed a tall, dark-haired man with the same brown eyes as Robert, the same face shape, the same square jaw. Robert's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. There he was, his blood son, the son Marian had carried, whom he should have held in his arms that night in 1993. A complete stranger, a man who didn't even know of his existence. And Peter. What to do with Peter? How to face the reality that the boy he raised, loved, gave everything to, didn't have a single drop of his blood. The weeks passed. Robert withered, losing weight, turning grey. Joe asked what was happening, but he just shook his head. Peter insisted his father get checked out, worried. "Dad, you're not well. Please see a doctor." "I'm fine, son. It's just tiredness." But he wasn't fine. He was shattering inside. Helen called one more time, her voice weak, almost inaudible. "Mr. Miller, I know I dropped a bomb on your life, but you need to do what you think is right. I'm leaving. The doctors gave me 2 weeks at most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Robert hung up the phone, sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He cried. Cried as he hadn't cried since Marian's funeral. Sobs that shook his whole body, tears that wouldn't stop falling. That's when he decided. He needed scientific truth. He couldn't live with the doubt. He collected genetic material from Peter without him knowing, a strand of hair from his brush, an old toothbrush. He collected his own material, sent it to a private lab, paying with the savings he kept for emergencies. 3 weeks later, the result arrived by mail. A white envelope, sealed. Robert looked at it for hours, sitting at the kitchen table. Flies buzzed around the rotting fruit in the basket. The wall clock marked the hours with endless ticks. He opened the envelope with trembling hands, read it, reread it, and read it once more. Probability of paternity, 0%. Excluded as biological father. Robert vomited. Ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left in his stomach, then slid down the cold ceramic floor and stayed there, hugging the toilet, trembling. 30 years. 30 years of love, dedication, sacrifice, and all based on a lie. He was not a father. He had never been a father. He was just the man who raised someone else's child. And Marian? Did she know? Of course she knew. The tears after the birth, the pleas for forgiveness, the deathbed confession he interrupted. She always knew, and died without telling the truth. Robert felt anger, a deep visceral anger that burned like acid. Anger at Marian for lying, anger at Helen for switching the babies, anger at Paul Santana for orchestrating it all, anger at Beatrice for accepting a child that wasn't hers, and anger at himself for being so blind, so naive. But the anger was replaced by an even greater pain, because deep down, very deep down, Robert knew none of that mattered. Peter was his son, son of the heart, of upbringing, of love. Blood did not define parenthood, presence did. The sacrifices did. The sleepless nights when Peter was sick, the hugs when he cried, the conversations about life, the Saturday lunches, all that was real, all that counted. But there was still Luke, the biological son, the son Marion had carried. Did he have the right to know? Did he have the right to know the truth about his origins? Robert decided yes. He spent 2 more weeks gathering courage. Finally, he sent a message to Luke through social media. "My name is Robert Miller. I need to speak with you about something very important related to your birth. Please give me a chance to explain." Luke responded 3 days later. "About my birth? What are you talking about? Who are you?" Robert sent a photo of himself from 1993 next to a pregnant Marion. He sent copies of the documents Helen had given him. He sent the DNA test result, excluding Peter as his biological son. The response took a week. When it came, it was short and curt. "Meet me at the downtown cafe this Saturday, 2 p.m. The day arrived. Robert wore the best clothes he had, a worn dress pants and a white shirt slightly yellowed with time. His hands were sweating. His heart raced. He arrived 15 minutes early, sat at a table in the corner, ordered a coffee that cooled without him taking a sip. Luke arrived exactly on time. Tall, elegant, an impeccable navy blue suit, leather shoes shining. He looked around until he located Robert, walked to the table with firm, confident steps. Robert stood up, extended his hand. "Luke, I'm Robert." Luke shook his hand, the touch cold, distant. Sat down without removing his sunglasses. "Explain. And be quick because I have a meeting in an hour." Robert took a deep breath, and he told him everything. The switch at the hospital, Helen, the confession, the DNA test. Every word weighed tons. Luke listened in silence, his face unreadable behind the sunglasses. When Robert finished, the silence stretched for eternal minutes. Finally, Luke took off his glasses. The brown eyes were identical to Robert's, scarily identical. "You're saying I'm your son, that my mother is not my mother?" "Biologically, yes. My wife, Marion, and I are your biological parents. But the family that raised you, that loved you, no." Luke raised his hand, interrupting. "Don't talk to me about love. You appear out of nowhere 30 years later, with this absurd story and want what? Recognition, money, a piece of my life? I don't want anything. I just thought you had the right to know the truth." "The truth?" Luke gave a bitter laugh. "The truth is that I grew up with Paul and Beatrice. They are my parents. This woman, Marion, whom I never met, means nothing to me. And you, a 2-bit mechanic, mean nothing either." The words cut like knives. Robert felt his eyes well up, but didn't let the tears fall. "I understand you're angry, it's a shock, but there is no but. I want nothing to do with you. I don't want to know your life, your problems, nothing. To me, you don't exist." Luke stood up, put his glasses back on. "And if you try to contact me again, I'll sue for harassment. Is that clear?" Robert just nodded. Luke turned his back and left the cafe without looking back. Robert stayed there, sitting, looking at the cold coffee. He felt his chest tighten, his throat close. 30 years waiting for a son who didn't even want to know him. Was this divine justice? Was this the reward for a lifetime of honesty and hard work? He returned home devastated. Went in, locked the door, pulled the curtains, stayed in the dark for hours. That's when he heard the key turning in the lock. Peter had a copy. He entered, turned on the light, and froze when he saw his father sitting on the sofa, staring at nothing. "Dad, what happened?" "Joe called me worried, saying you didn't show up at the shop again." "Are you sick?" Robert looked at Peter, that boy he had raised, whom he taught to walk, to read, to be a good man. That boy who didn't have a single drop of his blood. "Peter, sit here. I need to tell you something." And Robert told him everything. The nurse, the switch, the DNA test, Luke. Every word was agony, but he could no longer carry that weight alone. Peter listened in silence. His face went through various expressions: shock, anger, confusion, pain. When Robert finished, tears were streaming down the young man's face. "So I'm not your son? Mum wasn't my real mum?" "Biologically, no, but in everything that matters, yes. You are my son, Peter. You always have been and always will be. And this Luke, he is your blood son?" "He is. But he wants nothing to do with me. He rejected me. Peter was silent for long minutes. Then he stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the street. Robert could see his shoulders trembling, holding back sobs. "I need time to process this, Dad. I need to be alone." "I understand, son." Peter left without saying goodbye, and he didn't return for 3 weeks. They were the 3 longest weeks of Robert's life. He didn't know if Peter would return. He didn't know if he had lost the only son who really mattered. He kept working at the auto shop, but he was a zombie. A mechanic on autopilot, thoughts always on Peter. It was Joe who brought news. "Mr. Miller, I saw Peter yesterday. He was at the mall talking to some guy. Looked serious." "What guy?" "I don't know. Never seen him before. But they looked a lot alike. Same height, same way of walking." Robert's heart raced. Luke. Was Peter with Luke? 3 days later, Peter showed up at the auto shop. He wasn't alone. Luke was with him. Robert dropped the tool he was holding. His legs went weak. The 2 young men walked over to him. Peter spoke first. "Dad, I looked for Luke. We talked a lot, and we discovered something you need to know." Luke continued, his voice less hostile than at the cafe. "I did my own DNA test with my mother, Beatrice, and the result was unexpected." Robert could barely breathe. "What did you discover?" Peter held Luke's hand, a gesture that surprised Robert. "Dad, we both did a DNA test between us, and we discovered we are brothers." "Blood brothers? What do you mean? That's impossible." Luke took a deep breath. "My mother, Beatrice, confessed everything when I confronted her with the documents you showed me. She had an affair with someone before she met Paul, got pregnant. The biological father was the same father as Marion's." Robert's world turned upside down. "The same father?" "Yes. Marion and Beatrice were half-sisters. They didn't know, but they had the same father, a man who abandoned both families. So when Marion got pregnant by you and Beatrice got pregnant from her affair, the babies were first cousins, genetically very similar." Peter completed. "The DNA test between me and Luke showed we are cousins, and the test between Luke and Beatrice confirmed that she is not his biological mother." Robert needed to sit down, his head was spinning. "But then, who is Luke's biological mother?" "It was Marion," Luke said, his voice choked. "Marion was my biological mother, and Beatrice was Peter's mother. But since we were cousins on our grandfather's side, the genes were similar. That's why no one suspected for so long. The pieces finally fell into place. The switch at the hospital, the 2 women who were half-sisters without knowing, the babies who were cousins, the genetic confusion that masked the truth for 30 years. But wait," Robert said, his mind trying to process everything. "If Luke is the son of Marion and me, and Peter is the son of Beatrice, and who?" Luke looked down. "With Paul Santana. The doctor who orchestrated the switch was, in fact, Peter's biological father. He knew the baby was his, so he wanted to ensure he stayed with the family that had money. But after the switch, he ended up with the sick baby, his own son with Beatrice, believing it was your son with Marion. The complexity was almost absurd. Paul Santana had switched the babies, but ended up raising his own biological son, thinking he was raising a stranger. And Robert raised Paul's son with Beatrice, thinking it was his son with Marion. While Luke, the true son of Robert and Marion, grew up with Beatrice thinking he was Paul's son." "This is crazy," Robert murmured. "It is," Peter agreed. "But in the end, Dad, does this change anything? You raised me. You are my father in everything that matters." Luke added, "And I grew up without a real father. Paul died when I was 25. Beatrice confirmed to me that he was cold, distant, always focused on work. He was never a real father. So maybe I can learn what it's like to have a real father." Robert looked at the 2 young men, one he raised without being biologically his, the other who was biologically his, but grew up far away. And now both there, together, offering a chance at family. The tears came, thick, warm, liberated. Robert hugged Peter first, squeezing tight, feeling the body of his son, yes, his son, against his chest. Then he opened an arm for Luke, who hesitated only a second before entering the hug. "You are my sons," Robert said between sobs. "Both of you. It doesn't matter about blood, DNA, any of that. You are my sons." The 3 men stayed there, hugging, crying. Joe watched from a distance, wiping his own eyes with a greasy rag. The following weeks were full of discoveries and adjustments. Peter and Luke became close, discovering similarities and differences, building a sibling relationship that DNA had already determined, but that the heart needed to confirm. Beatrice asked to meet Robert. She was different, thin, her blonde hair now dyed white, her face marked by guilt and time. They sat in a cafe, the same one where Robert had first met Luke. "Robert, I didn't know," she began, her voice trembling. "Paul deceived me too. He told me the baby was ours, that he had been born healthy thanks to emergency surgery. I never imagined, never suspected." "And when did you discover the truth?" 5 years ago, just before Paul died. He confessed everything. He was remorseful, afraid of dying with that weight. He told me about the switch, about Helen, about everything. I was destroyed. I spent years wanting to tell Luke, but I was afraid of losing my son. "But he is not your son, Peter is." Beatrice began to cry. "I know, and I am so sorry, but I raised Luke. I loved that boy, as if he were mine, just like you loved Peter." Robert understood, because in the end, they were the same. Two parents who loved children who were not biologically theirs. Two parents who did the best they could with the cards life dealt them. "Do you want to meet Peter? Your biological son?" Beatrice shook her head, tears streaming. "I don't know if I have that right. I don't know if he will want to meet me. Let me talk to him." When Robert told Peter about Beatrice's request, the young man was quiet for a long time. He looked at his own hands, processing. "She carried me, but she didn't raise me. I don't know what I feel for her." "You don't need to know right now, son, but maybe meeting her will help you understand where you came from. And my mom, Marion, did she know everything?" Robert sighed. "I believe so. Her last words, the way she acted, she knew, and she suffered with it her whole life. She should have told. She should have. But sometimes people keep secrets because they think they are protecting those they love. It's not right, but it's human." Peter finally agreed to meet Beatrice. The meeting was tense, charged with emotion. Beatrice looked at Peter with a mixture of fascination and pain, seeing traces of herself in that face she had never known. "You grew up well," she said, her voice choked. "Robert raised you well." "He is the best father I could have," Peter replied, without hostility, just honesty. "I know, and I'm not here to try to be your mother. I know I don't have that right. I just wanted you to know that if I had known the truth from the beginning, I would have fought for you. I would have loved you as much as I loved Luke." Peter nodded, his eyes moist. "Thank you for saying that." They didn't become mother and son, but over the months, they developed a respectful, caring relationship in their own way. Beatrice started attending the Saturday lunches that now happened at Robert's house with both young men. It was strange at first, but it gradually became normal. Luke started spending more time at the auto shop, learning mechanics from Robert. "I've never done anything with my hands," he admitted, smiling as he looked at his grease-stained fingers. "It's cool. It's real." Robert taught him patiently, the same way he had taught Peter as a child. But Peter had never been interested in mechanics. Luke was. He had a knack for it. Steady hands, attention to detail, patience for solving problems. "You take after me," Robert said one day, pride in his voice. Luke smiled. A genuine smile, not the cold corporate smile he used before. "Yeah, I guess I do." 6 months after the revelation, Helen passed away. Robert went to the funeral. There were few people. The woman had few friends, no close family. He stood by the coffin, looking at that peaceful face. "Thank you," he whispered, "for having the courage to tell the truth, even if it was late, for giving me a chance to know my biological son, and for making me understand that fatherhood is so much more than blood." He returned home and hugged Peter for long minutes. "I love you, son. You know that, right?" "I know, Dad. I love you too. Nothing that happened changes that. You are my son, my first son, the son of my heart." Peter cried. Robert cried. And in that hug, they sealed the truth that DNA could never deny. They were father and son, not by biology but by choice, by love. By 30 years of shared history, Luke also became part of Robert's life. He didn't replace Peter, nor did he try, but he found his place. He began to simplify his life, stepping back from the cold corporate world, focusing on projects that really mattered. He used his technology knowledge to create an app that connected independent mechanics like Robert to customers, helping small business owners grow. "It's my way of giving back," he said. "You gave me something money could never buy, a real family." The Saturday lunches became sacred. Robert, Peter, Luke, and sometimes Beatrice. Sitting under the shade of the mango tree, eating simple food, talking about everything and nothing. Joe always showed up too, because he was part of that strange and imperfect family. A year after the revelation, Robert had a minor heart attack. Nothing serious, but it scared everyone. Peter and Luke took turns at the hospital, neither wanting to leave their father alone. "You don't need to do this," Robert said, weak but smiling. "Go to work, go live your lives." "Are you crazy?" Peter replied. "You spent your whole life taking care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Luke agreed. "Our turn." Robert looked at the two young men by the bedside. So different, but both his sons, both there by choice, not by obligation. "I am a lucky man," he murmured. "No, Dad," Peter said, holding his hand. "We are the lucky ones." When Robert was discharged, he discovered his sons had renovated the house, painted the walls, fixed the gate, replaced the leaking roof. Luke had hired a company. Peter had coordinated everything. "You didn't have to." "Of course we did," Luke interrupted. "This is our family home. It needs to be in good condition." Robert cried. Again. It seemed he cried a lot lately, but they were good tears. Tears of gratitude. The months passed. The emotional wounds healed. Peter made peace with Marion's memory, understanding that she had kept the secret out of love, not malice. Luke learned to forgive Paul, recognizing that the man had made terrible choices, but had also tried to be a father in his own way. And Robert learned the greatest lesson of all, that family is not defined by chromosomes or blood types. It is defined by presence, by choice, by love that manifests in daily actions, in Saturday lunches, in hands dirty with grease working together, in hugs that heal invisible wounds. 2 years after the revelation, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Robert gathered everyone at the renovated house: Peter, Luke, Beatrice, Joe, and some close friends. He had prepared a barbecue, something he rarely did, considering it an unnecessary luxury. "I wanted to thank all of you," he said, his voice firm despite the emotion, "for teaching me that losing a certainty can be painful, but gaining the truth is liberating. I spent 30 years thinking I knew who I was, who my family was, and when everything crumbled I discovered I knew nothing." He paused, looking at Peter and Luke side by side. "But I also discovered something much more important. I discovered that love doesn't need a birth certificate, that a father is not the one who gives the DNA, but the one who gives his life. Not biological life, but real life. The teachings, the values, the shoulder to cry on, the hand to hold." Peter discreetly wiped his eyes. Luke did too. "So today I want to formalize something. Peter, you have always been my son, but Luke, I wanted to ask you, will you accept me as your father, officially? Because I would love for you to have my last name too." Luke was paralyzed. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed to whisper, You're serious?" "Completely serious. You are my son, Luke, by blood, by heart, in every way that matters. And I want the world to know that." Luke crossed the yard in 3 long strides and hugged Robert tightly. "Yes," he said, his voice broken. "Yes, I accept. I want to have your last name. I want to be your son, officially." The guests applauded. Beatrice was crying, a huge smile on her face. Peter hugged them both, creating a chain of affection that seemed to radiate warmth to everyone around. In the following months, the legal processes were handled. Luke Santana became Luke Miller Santana, keeping both last names as a bridge between the two worlds that formed him. The auto shop got a new sign: Miller & Sons, General Auto Repair. Peter continued being a teacher, but started giving free English lessons to underprivileged youth in the neighborhood, inspired by his father's example of generosity. Luke used part of his wealth to expand the auto shop, hire more mechanics, create a learning program for youth without opportunities. "We're giving other boys what my father gave me," Luke explained when asked. "A chance, a family, a purpose." Robert watched it all with his heart overflowing with pride. His sons, so different, but so good, so upright. Peter with his passion for education. Luke with his talent for business used for good, both carrying the values he tried to instill: honesty, hard work, compassion. 3 years after the revelation, on a quiet Sunday morning, Robert woke up with the sun warming his face through the newly installed window. He got up slowly. His knees always complained on cold mornings, and walked to the kitchen, made coffee, the familiar aroma filling the house. He looked around. The walls painted a soft beige, the new floor without cracks, the simple but well-kept furniture, the photos on the wall showing a family that genetics couldn't explain, but that love completely justified. There was a recent photo, taken last Christmas, Robert in the center, a son on each side, all smiling genuinely. Beatrice was there too, a bit apart but part of the group. Joe appeared in the corner making a funny face. It was imperfect. It was strange. It was beautiful. The phone rang. It was Peter. "Good morning, Dad. Just calling to remind you that it's barbecue at my house today. Luke already confirmed he's coming. You're coming, right?" "Of course, son. I wouldn't miss it for anything." "Great. And Dad, I have some news to tell you. It might be a surprise." "News? What kind of news?" "Come early and you'll find out. Love you, Dad." "Love you too, son." Robert hung up, curious. Peter wasn't one for mystery. What surprise could that be? A few hours later, he arrived at Peter's house, a modest but cozy apartment. Luke was already there, helping to prepare the meat. When Robert entered, the two sons exchanged a knowing look. "Dad, sit here," Peter said, pointing to the sofa. Robert sat, his heart racing. "You're making me nervous. What's going on?" Luke sat on one side, Peter on the other. Both were holding papers. "Dad," Peter began, "you always talk about how discovering the DNA truth changed everything. And it did. But there was one thing we never investigated completely." Robert frowned. "What do you mean?" Luke continued. "We got curious about the whole story, so we hired a private investigator, and we discovered some things about our grandmothers, about the man who was the father of Marion and Beatrice." "And what did you discover?" "We discovered he was a terrible man. Abandoned 6 different families, had children in several states, never acknowledged any of them." Robert sighed. "That's sad, but I don't—" "Wait, Dad. There's more. We also discovered that Marion had a younger sister. Not just Beatrice, who was a half-sister, but a full-blood sister. Her name is Claire." Robert's heart almost stopped. "Marion had a sister. She never mentioned—" "Because they were separated as children. Different adoptions, but Dad, we found her, Claire. She lives out of state, she's 62, and when we told her the story, she cried. Said she always dreamed of meeting her sister, but could never find her before Marion died." Peter took out his phone and showed a photo. A woman with grey hair, deep dark eyes, a soft smile. It was Marion. It wasn't Marion. It was and wasn't at the same time. "She wants to meet you, Dad. Wants to talk about Marion. She has photos from when they were babies, documents, stories that her adoptive family kept." Robert held the phone with trembling hands. He looked at that woman who carried half of Marion's genes, a connection to the past, a bridge to the woman he loved and lost. She wants to meet me? Even after everything that happened? She said you were the only man who truly loved her sister, that you raised another person's child as your own, that you are proof that good men still exist." The tears came without warning. Robert cried there between his two sons, feeling the weight and beauty of how life had unfolded. All the pains, all the losses, all the shocking revelations, everything had led to this moment, to this imperfect and wonderful family. "When can I meet her?" Luke smiled. "How about now?" The doorbell rang. Peter went to answer, and when he returned, he brought a woman with grey hair, eyes full of tears, a nervous smile. "Robert," she said, her voice so similar to Marion's that he felt his chest tighten. "I'm Claire, Marion's sister." Robert stood up, his legs weak. He walked to her, and without thinking, hugged that stranger who carried the essence of his late wife, hugged and cried. "She loved you very much," Claire whispered. "I found letters she wrote but never sent. Letters asking for forgiveness, explaining why she kept the secret. She loved you so much, Robert, and she suffered so much with the lie." "I know," he replied. "I always knew, deep down, and I forgive her. I forgive everyone." They spent the afternoon talking. Claire told stories from childhood that she heard from her biological family before being adopted, showed photos of 2 little girls, Marion and her, before the separation, shared letters, documents, pieces of a life Robert never knew. "Marion was strong," Claire said, "but she was also haunted by her father's abandonment, by the separation from her family. When she met you, she finally found peace. You were the family she always wanted. and she was everything to me. I know. And because of that, I want to be part of your life if you'll allow it. I can't bring my sister back, but I can try to keep her memory alive." Robert smiled through the tears. "I would love that." That night, after everyone had left, Robert stayed alone on Peter's porch, looking at the starry city sky, or the little of it that could be seen between the light pollution. He thought about everything that had happened: Helen's revelation, Luke's initial rejection, the discovery of the complex genetic connection between everyone, the acceptance, the forgiveness, the new beginning. He thought of Marion, wherever she was, and whispered, "I understand now, love. You did what you thought was right. You loved our son, both our sons, the best you could, and I forgive you, completely." A soft breeze passed over him, carrying the scent of jasmine, Marion's favorite perfume. Peter came out onto the porch, 2 cups of tea in his hands. He sat next to his father in comfortable silence. "Are you okay, Dad?" "I am, son, better than I've been in a long time." "I know it was a lot, many revelations, many emotions." Robert looked at his son, the son who wasn't biologically his, but was his in every way that mattered. "It was, but you know what I learned?" "What?" "That family is what we build, not what chance gives us. DNA can say you are not my son, but 30 years of breakfast together, of conversations before bed, of hugs when you cried, of pride when you achieved something, that says something else." Peter rested his head on his father's shoulder, something he hadn't done since he was a child. "I was so afraid of losing you when I found out the truth. Losing me. Afraid that you would love me less. Afraid that you would prefer Luke, the real son." Robert put his arm around Peter's shoulders. "Son, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. There is no real son or fake son. There is son, period. And you are my son. Luke is also my son, different but equal in my heart." What if Marion had told the truth from the beginning? Robert thought for a moment. "I don't know, maybe it would have been easier, maybe it would have been harder, but I'd like to believe I would have done the same thing. I would have loved you exactly the same way. Even knowing I was the son of Paul Santana, the man who orchestrated the switch, especially because of that. You are not defined by who fathered you, Peter. You are defined by who you are. And you are a good man, upright, generous. That didn't come from Paul. That came from how you were raised. It came from Marion, it came from me, it came from the choices you yourself made." They stayed there for hours, father and son, talking about everything and nothing, about the past and the future, about losses and gains, about the strange and wonderful journey life had prepared for them. Comment below "The family is complete" to let me know you made it to the end of this video, and I'll mark your comment with a special heart. And if Robert's story moved you, I have another even more surprising one to share with you. Just click on the video that's appearing on your screen now, and I'll tell you all about it. A big hug, and see you next time for another emotional story. Bye-bye.